Okay, shall we get started? That's great. I really don't want to interrupt that interaction because that's interactive. That's what we want to be here for, right? Was that an awesome lunch or what? I ate the whole thing. Okay, I'm Sally Alexander. I'm from the Student Academic Success Center. I'm the International Student Resources Coordinator. I run the EDU 98 programs. But you can find out all about that in the exhibit from 2 to 3:30. There's poster exhibits. And this is my graduate student researcher, Mike. And he's going to be helping today. Mike does all my statistics for the EDU 98. But today what I wanted to do, we only have 20 minutes, that's not much time. I want to give you all an exercise, an individual exercise, that's going to help you eventually generate some ideas for improving cross-cultural communication. Did you know that on this campus, currently about 38% of the students speak English as a second language? That's before you add the thousands of international students, most of whom speak English as a second language, to the population. Soon there's going to be more than 50% of the campus speaks English as a second language. There's a lot of studies in second language acquisition. Suffice it to say that second language acquisition and first language acquisition are completely different. We don't really know exactly how it works in the brain, but we know that they work differently. So what Mike is doing right now is handing out some paper for you. I hope you have a writing implement. If not, Mike has some pens. Not on a computer. You cannot use a laptop for this exercise. What we're going to do is a psycholinguistic activity. My academic background is in linguistics and psycholinguistics. And this is an activity which replicates what it's like to work in your second language. Now, the ESL students and international students who are working in their second language are doing this 24/7. You only need to do it for 5 minutes. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is on that piece of paper, I use recycled paper. You can ignore the backside or read some really great study strategies that one of my TAs shared with the class. On that piece of paper, I'm going to ask you to write for 5 minutes on a particular topic. But before we do that, I want to give you some restrictions. The first one is, if you know a second language or ever studied a second language, write in that language. Please put your name and the date on the top. You will be graded on this. More paper. Does anybody have any extra sheets of paper that you could share? If you've already got, it doesn't have to be on this piece of paper. So sharing's caring. Okay, so the first restriction is either write in your second language, even if it was 3 years ago or 10 years ago or 30 years ago in high school. Or if you don't have a second language, I want you to switch from your dominant hand to your non-dominant hand. If you're ambidextrous and you are bilingual, you can do whatever you like, because you know what I'm doing. Okay, are we all ready to write for 5 minutes? This is an individual exercise, no talking, imagining you're taking a midterm. And the topic are, what are your 3 biggest challenges dealing with students? On an everyday basis, what are your 3 biggest challenges? Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, go. Remember, left hand or second language, or non-dominant hand. If you're left-handed, write with your right hand. Go. Oh, you can stop now. I'll put you out of your misery. I'm really surprised no one in here was groaning, because people usually do groan. She was, I just didn't hear her. Imagine spending your whole professional day this way and being evaluated on it. Did you feel some uncomfortableness? Like what? Just call it out. What? Pain, if you're not used to it. Yeah. What? Did you have a comment? Couldn't remember the question. That was going to be one of my questions. Did it have any impact on your content? Think about the level of coherency and logic to your answer. Did you switch because you couldn't remember that word? I realized in my second language, which is Spanish, I didn't know the word for challenges, which is kind of a problem because that's the question. Desafíos? Okay. Any other things that you noticed? So pain was one of them. Another was lost the logic or content. Anything else? Okay, so it's totally incomprehensible, which English teachers put as incoherent. Yeah?
I was frustrated because I had, like you said, switch, but try and find something a little more basic to substitute for challenge.
Yeah, frustrated that you have to go for really basic. You feel sort of like second grade, yes?
Yeah, I feel really embarrassed if I had to turn that in.
Yes, for a grade especially. And someone over here? Yes.
Started trying to make up words.
Make up words, that's a new one, okay. Shorter, yes. Make up, I'm going to say just go for it, which is what ESL students do all the time, yes.
It took a lot longer because I had to think about it in my first language and then try to find words to express it.
Much slower, yeah. Any others? Yes.
I was really repetitive because people know the word for and so I had to remember.
Good point, good point. It worked once, it'll work more, so we'll just fill the page, yes. Yeah, it does make sense. In fact, ESL students actually say the reverse, that they can't find the words in English to adequately express the way they say it in their first language. Yes.
What is the word for challenges in Spanish?
Desafíos. I looked it up last night because I knew it was going to come. Yeah.
So I wrote with my non-dominant hand, and I found that I had to slow down, but then my thoughts were still going fast, so I had to like go back and say, wait.
Right. The speed of thinking versus being able to produce it. I do want to caution you about the left-handed switching hands. I did it for 6 weeks as an undergraduate research project, and I started stuttering and forgot how to spell. Because you're using different neural pathways, and so it's not a really great idea to do that in your junior year in your major classes. But it was a class project, so I did it. Did anybody enjoy any part of it? Yes.
I use French, which I haven't studied since I was an undergraduate several decades ago, and I was actually surprised I could put a sentence together.
Honestly, a little achievement there. And someone over here said that they...
I was proud of my accomplishment.
Yes, and I've had people also say that other languages sometimes are more fluid or better at expressing things. English in general is very literal and very straightforward, but other languages allow you to be a little bit more poetic, a little bit more illusionary, and just, a little bit more creative. So the point of this was to give you a sense of walking a mile in an ESL student's shoes, which I can't do right now. And by the way, I broke my kneecap in May, and that's why I'm hobbling around. So I'm not going to walk a mile, but I do have this experience. So this is what's going on with the non-native speakers every time they interact with you in a social situation. This is happening. Now, I didn't ask you to turn these in. I would like to collect them if you want to give them to me. I've been collecting these for decades. I think it's really interesting to see, if you think about your ego and your personality, how it can change in different languages too. That one of the students you're working with may seem really aggressive and assertive, and it's really not the personality, it's really just the expression that makes the person seem very basic, very frustrated, very angry, very slow. And it's really just language processing that's doing that. So these are the issues that we had here. Is there anything we could have done, and this is the brainstorming session part, is there anything I could have done or we could have done that would have made it a little bit easier for you? Based on what made it hard for you, what would have made it easier for you? More time, okay. So slow down. I would say in many cases, especially, just a moment, in many cases, especially in our jobs where we say the same thing over and over and over again, no, the financial aid office is not here on the second floor of South Hall in SAIC. It's down the hall and to the left, and then you see it over there. I say that thousands of times a day. I need to slow down and say that a little bit more slowly. You had one.
Having somebody as a
Translator, that would be great, except that that would be ideal, but we don't have that usually. And I would say the electronic translators get in the way. As soon as the student looks down at that translator, they lose the context, they lose the next 5 minutes of what we're talking about. Yes, it would be nice, I think, in an ideal, but we're probably not going to get that. You had a point.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, it might be easier to write if you're actually
Back it up with writing. In speech, now you did a writing exercise, but the same things affect speech. Yes?
Breaking it down to smaller parts.
Smaller parts, okay. I could have given you a smaller task. Instead of saying top 3 challenges, I could say write the 1 challenge. And I could have modeled it for you too. And that's another one, is giving you a model of the expected response. Somebody back there?
Using visual aid.
Visual aid, definitely. If if when you're working with students, you're explaining some policy or something, if you pull up that website and actually point at it, it's going to back up what you've said. And that happens a lot. I have to turn off the touch screen feature of my monitor because I'm always pointing at the thing and saying, yes, that's what this part means, and that's what this part means. And then instead of just explaining where they need to go, to actually point to it for them. Someone else was on this side, yes?
Have the question written down.
Yes. If I had written the question up here, we don't have a lot of tech. We have a lot of high tech in this room. Notice I'm not using any of it except for the microwave, the microphone. Microwave, I'm thinking Espanol. We teach 20 sections of EDU 98 in fall quarter, and we're an academic surge, and 90% of the technology in the rooms does not work. And even today, in the presentations I went to this morning, every single session had a problem with the technology, and that's why I kind of favor this not technology. The other thing is that students in our classes tend to be very reliant on their phones and on taking notes, and every second they're looking down there, they're not engaging with me or with the other students in the class. Were there any other comments about, yes?
I was just going to say, in my training, the more senses, the more of the five senses you can use, the better you can understand communicate. So if you say something, you can put it on a map, you give handwritten materials, or they copy it down, they write it. That's just one more way of knowing and understanding and processing.
Exactly. Making sure they understand and having them repeat it back to you is a critical factor of whether or not they understood it. All the international students that I deal with are always smiling and nodding. Yes. And I know them personally. I know they don't understand. Like, this person understands 2%, that person understands 98%, but all of them are smiling and nodding. And so when I ask them to, as I've done here, what do you think? One thing we do in class is you're all very eager to participate. You're all polished professionals who communicate well, and it's easy for you to participate in this class. With the international students and ESL students, what I do is give them a chance to write down. I ask a question, have them all write it, and then they can share with somebody and then share with the class. Or to summarize it, so it's think, pair, share, so that it's not calling on people for that information. But not all classes have that luxury. A lot of lecture classes have to just present information that way. By the way, the PowerPoints that I saw this morning were all very informative, but even for someone who reads 1,200 words per minute, it was a lot of information. For someone who maybe reads 150 words per minute, if they read it 3 times, just that incredible amount of written material that they're given would cause a problem. Were there any other comments about how we can make it? Yes?
Maybe it's counter to the exercise, but having the option to write.
Yes. That's not counter to the exercise at all. The exercise was designed to get you out of your comfort zone and to help you feel that. English teachers in the old days used to say, think in English, when they were only speaking English, think in English. Well, that's really pretty darn silly. You're going to think in your first language. You're going to feel in your first language. So use the dominant, use your strengths. So yes, have the student formulate the question in their first language and then ask you in their second language. And allow them time to do that. And I think that's where the translator came in, is allow time for translation. That whenever I ask a question in class, I translate the question into Spanish myself while I'm waiting for the students to respond, because that makes me slow down. I know what I want it to do, but I want to give them time to process it as well. Were there any other comments? Yes, in the back. Time of day, yes. This is right after lunch. I knew that when I came in here, which is why I ask people to move. And normally in a class, we would do no more than about 5 to 10 minutes in one activity and then move to another activity, so that people do get stimulated by that. 8 a.m. classes, on the other hand, are a completely different conundrum, that you're not quite awake. But actually, that kind of helps the ESL student, because you tend to slow down in the morning a little bit. Was there someone over here did I miss? How can you apply this? We've already sort of talked about the strategies there, and I think I'm out of time in 1 minute. Speaking of slowing down and speeding up. Can you think of any situations in which you could apply these kinds of things in your interactions with students? Somebody nodded their head. Anybody want to share? If you don't interact with students, or you don't need to? Yes, okay.
For us with the financial aid lingo, it can help us if we slow down, if we have a lot of language that's financially specific.
Yes.
Change that language, and this kind of reinforces the effort that we need to have for students to not only understand the financial aid language,
Exactly. My challenge here was, how do I say to students, how do I have the patience every time a student asks me a question to recognize that it's the first time that student asked the question. Even if it's the 1000th time, I'm going to answer it. But that question may be different from the one I'm expecting. So slowing down, the technical language definitely. On this campus, I was absolutely amazed when I arrived here, very long time ago, of all the acronyms. AOB4, MU2, what? And you too, MU. So just the names of buildings and things like that was really, because Berkeley doesn't do that. They have donors that have names on all the buildings. So yes, translating your technical language too. By the way, a lot of those students take those emails from the dean's office, from financial aid, from whatever, and they bring them to us and they ask us, what does this mean? I had one who got a $4,500 scholarship this year. Yay! But he didn't know if he really did or not, because of the language that said you have to have the documents done by July 1, and he didn't get the offer until July 15th, so he had already missed the, I mean, it was just something that seemed so obvious. You had a point.
So maybe along those lines of not always doing everything electronically, but actually having the students come in and talking face-to-face or over the phone or finding other ways to reach out to them when you can?
Yes, actually they do love email, but they like email personal answers. Like, you really need to ask admissions that, but I believe that. They will say, you know, so they do like individual things, but definitely face-to-face helps if you're able to slow down a little bit. And that's the magic, I think, of student affairs, is that there is a lot of face-to-face interaction, and students really appreciate that. And we try to get the students to go and talk to the relevant locations after they've first done the obvious thing. So if you want to know when your pastime is, go on to SysWeb and find out when it is. You don't need to talk to someone. But when you do have a question or you do want to know more about something, go talk to the staff member in person. I always tell students, you can email me a question and I'll email you the answer. If you come and ask me the question, you're likely to get that answer plus a whole lot more. I might have just heard of a job for you, or I might have just heard for a new workshop that you might be interested in, or I might be looking for a research assistant. So there's a lot more that's there and to establish a group. I didn't have time, we are out of time, I didn't have a chance to ask you what your challenges were. Are we completely out of time? Or do I have a minute left? Okay. Okay, I get a minute. Okay, so I would like to hear what challenges you wrote down, and you can do this in English, please. If you want to, you can do it in whatever language or scribbling that you wrote. So, did you have a challenge? Anyone else? Yes, in the back. Yes.
The challenge I had is I work with credentialing requirements, so just like Jason said, I have to speak in non-technical words, and that's something I really have to work hard to remember. What I know isn't what everybody else knows, so making it in language that's clear.
It's just the way our legal documents have had to change from legalese to plain English so that people can do it. So good point on that. Anyone else had a challenge? Yes.
I work in financial aid and just describing the federal regulations, the state regulations, just describing the different ones.
Describing state and federal regulations, I think you also have an additional problem in that you have to be very accurate and to the letter of the law, because that's law and policy, and that makes it even more problematic because you can't really change it conversationally without changing the meaning of it. But there could be an option where you have, and I think they do this on some legalese, where they have the legalese and then underneath it, it says, in plain English, this means, and then they write that. And if you have that prepared, sometimes then they can take that with them, then they have time to process it later on. Good point. Any other challenges that people had? I think you all really did a good job. If you'd like to turn in your little slip, I do collect them, by the way. It's kind of personal research. You can put them on the podium on the back there. I thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of the day.